Welcome to meeting number 85 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Citizenship and Immigration. For the first hour, we are continuing our study of closed work permits and temporary foreign workers. I'm pleased to welcome two witnesses with us today from the Canadian Agriculture Human Resource Council Chair, Ms. Peggy Breckveld, and also from the Western Canadian Wheat Growers Association, Director Posberg. Welcome to the committee. Ms. Breckveld, you have 5 minutes for the opening statement, and then we'll go to Mr. Posberg for 5 minutes of the opening statements. Thank you. Ms. Breckveld, go ahead, please.
Thank you. Mr. Chair and members of the committee, thank you for the invitation to participate in this committee study. I am Peggy Breckveld, Chair of the Canadian Agricultural Human Resource Council. My comments today will focus on the value of the temporary foreign workers to the Canadian agriculture industry. Canadian Agriculture Human Resource Council, or CARC, has been examining the workforce needs of the Canadian agriculture sector for more than 15 years. CARC, along with Canadian Federation of Agriculture and Food and Beverage Canada, is leading the National Workforce Strategic Plan for Agriculture and Food and Beverage Manufacturing. Together, we have engaged industry stakeholders on ways to address work shortages. CARC's most recent labour market research, released November 1st of 2023, illustrates the critical role the agriculture sector plays on the Canadian economy, fulfilling both domestic and global food, fuel, and fibre demands. In 2022, the Canadian agriculture sector generated $38.8 billion in GDP, or 1.9% of the national total. Canada has established itself as a major producer of diverse and high-quality agricultural products. It ranks among the world's largest exporters, with $92.8 billion in agricultural and processed food exports in 2022. Secure access to an affordable, safe, and reliable food supply for both Canadians and the world relies on a skilled and motivated workforce. The success of agriculture and its sector does as well. The data is impressive. The agriculture sector, including crops and animal production, support services, and agricultural wholesale, employed over 351,000 Canadian workers and 71,000 temporary foreign workers, including the seasonal ag worker program workers in 2022. Even with these additional workers from other parts of the world, the industry still experienced 28,200 job vacancies in the same year. Over the next decade, expanding global markets for Canadian food products are expected to drive substantial growth in this sector. The challenges to meet this growth will need strategic responses. There are several ways the industry is planning to address this. Part of that response will need to address a labour shortage that is already present and likely to grow. The National Workforce Strategic Plan is examining this issue. The care and well-being of agriculture workers, both domestic and foreign, are the top priority of agriculture employers. Agriculture employers work very closely with Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada, with Employment and Social Development Canada, and Service Canada to ensure that oversights and regulations are in place to protect workers and employers, that the processes continue to improve, and that bad actors are rooted out. The industry's goal is for workers, both domestic and foreign, to choose agriculture as a place to work. Having a stable, predictable, and fully functioning workforce will benefit employers, employees, and our food system. We know Canada and Canadians deserve a stable food system, but as well, so do countries around the world that depend on us for food. Look forward to questions from the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Breckveld, and now we'll go to Mr. Posberg for 5 minutes. Please.
Thank you. Yeah, so thank you for the opportunity to speak regarding the Temporary Foreign Worker Program. My name is Kenton Posberg. My wife and I own and operate a grain and oilseed farm in Humboldt, Saskatchewan. I'm also a director with the Western Canadian Wheat Growers Association. Besides that, I've been sitting on several working groups and committees relating to the Temporary Foreign Worker Program for the last 10 years. Our farm currently has 6 full-time staff. During the growing season, we hire an additional 10 people. On a grain farm, the peak periods of employment are during the growing season, which is April through October. Of our seasonal staff, we have been successful in finding some residents to fill these roles, but we are always left with several positions being unfilled. To fill this void, we have been using the Temporary Foreign Worker Program to hire seasonal workers since the 2007 crop season. Our farm uses the agriculture stream. Under the current Temporary Foreign Worker Program, the LMIA needs to be submitted 6 months or more in advance to get all the approvals in place. Not only do we need to get the LMIA approved, but we also need to get the application for the work permit approved. The processing time for LMIAs has improved substantially in recent years, but the work permit processing time continues to be unpredictable and, depending on the country of the resident, up to 6 months to be approved. It also takes time and money to attract and recruit these individuals. One of the bigger issues with the current structure of the Foreign Worker Program is under the current NOC code classification, where machinery operators continue to be classified as low skill. This shows the department still does not understand the skill required to operate modern farm equipment. Where grains and oilseeds have a high skill requirement and high wage, our program rules get lumped into the same lower skill, lower wage positions. Housing is a good example. We really need a sector-specific and, more importantly, regionally specific program. In respect to implementing open work permits, I have some concerns. There's already a process in place that allows any foreign worker in Canada to change employers. The only requirement is that the new prospective employer must have a valid LMIA. There's a dedicated processing center to deal with these situations, and they get priority processing. If TFWs are given an open work permit upon arrival, it circumvents the whole process of employers recruiting Canadian workers for a specific job in their operation. Moreover, it could put employers, particularly those in the agriculture sector, at risk of losing employees just when they're needed the most. I also have a concern that workers could lose the protections that are built into the system, such as rules surrounding hiring the worker, their wage, working conditions, and housing. This will lead to some significant unintended consequences. As an employer, rather than taking the time, effort, and cost of recruiting the individual and paying for the flights, I'd be better off waiting for my neighbor to do this and then try to poach that individual. Open work permits would likely lead to significant numbers of TFWs leaving their rural employment to move to higher populated urban centers. For the grains and oilseeds industry, we have issues finding people due to our rural location. It doesn't help the Canadian economy or Canadian citizens if TFWs leave the regions they are needed to higher populated areas that don't need more people competing for jobs in industries that are not having issues finding workers. Even if the program did sectoral work permits, the consequence could be individuals leaving places like Humboldt to move to an operation near a larger community like Calgary, Saskatoon, or Edmonton. We continue to ask and request that the Temporary Foreign Worker Program follow through and create a standalone agriculture and agri-food program. We need to be removed from the generic program due to our long-standing labor shortage, rural location, and seasonal requirements that will never amount to full-time positions. Yep.
Thank you to both of you. And now we can proceed with the questions and answers. I would request the honourable members, before you start the question, if you can pose your question to either to Ms. Breckberg or Mr. Posberg, that will help. And with that, we'll start with Mr. Redikoff for 6 minutes, then we'll go to Parliamentary Secretary Chang for 6 minutes. Mr. Redikoff, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the to our witnesses for today. Great you can be here. A lot of the discussion that we've had at this committee has been around the living conditions of temporary foreign workers. And advocates for open permits have indicated that sometimes operators such as you folks are keeping workers in horrible conditions, some have said, and different things. So could you maybe, to Mr. Plossberg, could you describe to me how it is that housing is provided for temporary workers on a farm such as yours?
Our farm in particular, we have it's a family-style bunkhouse, or family-style bungalow that's located in Humboldt, and it's provided to the workers. We have to get an annual inspection done, and that inspection needs to be done prior to the LMIA being submitted. So all the checks and balances are in place to ensure that living conditions are suitable. The problem is because we are lumped into the rest of agriculture, a lot of the rules and regulations do tend to go to the lowest common denominator, which in this specific case would be more due to bunkhouse style conditions. And that's for grains and oilseeds, that's not at all what the kind of housing that we use.
So, Mr. Plossberg, if you could change one thing in that whole world in terms of housing, what would you change?
The $30 a week, that maximum that we're allowed to charge the worker. The people that we bring over tend to be from more affluent areas. They're from Western Europe. They're from, a lot of them have university degrees. They come from backgrounds where they demand certain styles of living conditions, and if they don't have those living conditions, they're not going to come. So, and due to the wage structure that we have, I think that it would be more than reasonable for us to qualify under what some of the other rules are for the high wage stream in the general program itself, which allows up to 30% of a worker's gross salary.
So, in your experience, what protections are in place for TFWs when they come to work in Canada? For instance, if someone was to poach a worker through an open work permit, as you were talking about, who would pay for the housing, the ticket home, that sort of thing? Is it something that the employer takes care of, or how does that work?
If there was an open work permit, I'm not sure what's being proposed here. If it was a completely open work permit, I guess those protections would be lost. There would be no. Currently, you can get audited. There's audits that happen routinely, and you're not notified of it. They can just show up at any given time, and you need to be able to provide all the documents and everything to ensure that the workers' protections are being met. Now, if you went to an open work permit, all that would be potentially lost.
So for a TFW that's working at your farm, for example, what protections do they have if they have a problem with your, if they want to leave your farm, for example? What can they do?
There's a hotline that they can phone, and there's an immediate response. There are provisions in place currently that if they want to switch farms, that's already in place. They just need to go to another farm that has an LMIA in place, but they have complete freedom to move around. And granted, it's protecting the Canadian workforce, because currently that the employer, prospective employer, would have to have an open LMIA, which they would have had to demonstrate that they have a need that they weren't able to find a Canadian citizen to meet. So now if you go and if they have an open work permit and they can go anywhere, they're going to be competing with Canadian citizens for jobs, possibly in sectors that they're not required, and then there are no fallbacks anymore.
Sorry, I just have a few minutes left. And one last question for you, Mr. Plossberg. The UN Special Rapporteur compared closed work permits to modern-day slavery. Are you and your colleagues practicing modern-day slavery?
No. So, and I heard that. And as a farmer, a Canadian farmer, that offends me. There's a lot of sensationalism that comes into play with some of this, and it disturbs me that it got the level of press that it did. And to my understanding, I'm not sure if they set foot in Canada, but I do know they didn't even set foot on a farm in Canada. So.
Okay, Ms. Brickfeld, in your organization's experience working with farmers, do farmers take care of their workers, or are they simply out to exploit them, as some people have suggested?
The system has to work for both the employer and the employee. If it doesn't, the program wouldn't exist the way it does, and it wouldn't do justice to either group.
Are there safeguards in place for workers who are on closed permits?
Yes, there are inspections, as Mr. Posberg spoke about. There is continued discussion about what the program should look like and what the qualifications are and what those standards are. And those are developed in coordination with both the industry and government.
Switching over to processing, we heard last week about a critical labor shortage in slaughter facilities for pork and beef, and TFW has been helpful there. So in the processing industry, in your opinion, how crucial is the TFW program to meeting the labor shortages that are there?
As mentioned, in 2022, we had a shortage over the entire sector, which includes processing, of over 100,000 people, and 71,000 we're filling in with TFWs. They are valued, they are needed to continue to grow this sector in the way that really we are headed.
Thank you, Mr. Redcock. We will go to Parliamentary Secretary, Mr. Chang, for 6 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for being here with us today. My question is directed to Ms. Brackwell. Thank you so much. Your council with the Canadian Federation of Agriculture and Food and Beverage Canada is currently developing a national workforce strategy for agriculture and food manufacturing. The objective of this strategy is to achieve workforce stability by 2030. In the interim report published in December of 2022, your council also states that to achieve workforce stability, temporary foreign workers and their contribution must be publicly recognized as a valued pillar of Canada's agricultural workforce. What do you think are the major barriers to their widespread acceptance?
Ms. Blackwell.
Part of the answer is understanding and acknowledging and vocally, publicly stating that they are skilled workers. They're not low-skilled, they are skilled workers that are required. You need a knowledge to understand how to prune a tree properly and so that the apples continue to produce. Part of it has to do with leaning into they are part of the solution and how can we best ensure that the situation is good for employees and employers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In your opinion, Ms. Brackwell, how can the government adapt the seasonal agricultural workers program to help the industry? And would additional pathways to permanent residency help fill the labor shortage in your industry?
So I'll answer the second part first, and then you can repeat the first part. You know, there have always been paths to permanent residency. Mm-hmm. My grandparents came as farm workers and have become permanent residents. My husband actually came on a farm worker permit as well and is now a permanent resident. The options have always been there. If the process isn't right, let's continue to work towards a better process. But the options are there. And your first question, could you repeat?
In your opinion, how can the government adapt the seasonal agricultural workers program to help the industry?
Yeah, I think it's continued consultation with the industry. Mm-hmm. Work with us and we'll work with you to ensure it's the right program. And again, we are in such a shortage in our industry that we want the employees to have a good experience and so that they also want to come back and continue to come back. Many do.
Can you expand on the tangible impact of labor shortages on the agricultural industry, and how has it affected the industry, the consumers, and the workers themselves?
When we don't have enough employees, it means we don't do the expansion that we can. Mm-hmm. It means that we leave produce on the field. And we saw that significantly during our COVID years. We left a lot of produce out on the field because we didn't have enough people to bring it in. It's a conversation about how do we continue to develop rural Ontario and ensuring the health of our agricultural sector, which contributes so greatly to the economy of Canada.
Thank you. I know the COVID has been a terrible strain on the whole world, not just the farming industry. So my question, we heard from many witnesses that temporary foreign workers are absolutely indispensable to the agricultural sector. Your reference to your council agricultural labor market research that was released on November the 1st of this year, which found that more than 28,200 jobs went unfilled during the peak season. How can the government help with the recruitment of temporary foreign workers, and how can the government ensure the safety and protection of these workers that are often made vulnerable?
It has been a continued conversation and continued effort on both accountability and enforcement. Government has the ability and has used their ability to monitor and assess and investigate, do inspections, et cetera, on farms. All of those pieces are part of what government does to ensure that employees are properly taken care of and that the program is working appropriately. I believe the future is continued that conversation of, do we have the right tools? Times change. We have to ensure we have the right tools and the right situations for employees and employers.
Thank you. With your background and experience in this agriculture industry, would you have any recommendation that you'd like to share with this committee about the work that we do and how we can enhance it?
CARC is currently working on the National Workforce Strategic Plan. I'm looking forward to sharing that data and that information, which is a bigger conversation about the labor shortage and the answers to go forward.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you,
Parliamentary
Mr.
Secretary
Chair.
Chang. And now we will go to my dear friend, Mr. Bruno Desab, for
Merci, mon cher président.
Thank you, my dear friend, Chair. Welcome to the committee. I am the member for Lac-Saint-Jean, a region that is in the northern part of Quebec. It is a rural, very agricultural area. And I'm curious about some questions right now, because according to the news that we hear on TV, there's a case of abuse. That is to say, though many people who are temporary foreign workers find themselves in a fluid situation. Mr. Fosberg, I understood from what you said, and also with respect to what was said by the special rapporteur from the UN, that you do not see it in the same way as he does.
I think abuse of workers, it doesn't matter if it's a Canadian citizen or a foreign worker. I think that employer needs to be dealt with swiftly, and there needs to be proper punishment that goes into place. When it comes to if that is the case, and that is proven to be true, I hope that that they're removed from the program and that they are no longer eligible to hire foreign workers again.
Merci. Dire quoi pour
Well, for an agricultural producer, say a small one, what happens? What does that mean when an agricultural worker leaves before the end of the contract? Is it a catastrophe, particularly during the harvest season?
Well, if you set up foot outside today, it's not very nice. So we do not control the weather. Mother Nature controls the weather. So for seeding, for instance, we have roughly 21 days to get the crop in the ground. After that, it's been statistically shown that yields will decline. So we need to make sure that we have the people in place to operate the equipment that we require to get the job done, whether it's seeding, spraying, or harvest. And if you don't have the people in place, that farm is not going to be successful.
Mais vous nous avez parlé aussi des investissements.
But you also spoke about investments to us, what that represents for producers to bring in foreign temporary workers. What does that mean concretely, tangibly? What is the amount of investment? Can you perhaps give us more detail?
When it comes to investment, I'm not looking for government to invest in anything for my farm. I'm just looking for the freedom to operate
Juste pour être clair,
Just to be clear, how much money does that represent per worker that you yourself have to pay out of your pocket when you bring them in?
Okay, yeah. It's quite significant. So we don't have to pay for an LMIA, but we do have to, for it to be processed. But if a person doesn't understand the program, then they have to hire a consultant, which could be around $3,000 or $5,000. The bigger issue is finding that worker. You can't get your LMIA approved, walk outside, shake the foreign worker tree, see who all falls down, and pick them, and then go back in. You need to recruit and locate these individuals, which can be quite difficult.
merci, Monsieur le Président. Et en même temps, de l'autre,
Thank you. But there, with respect to witnesses, we've heard who defend the rights of workers. They have said that there are closed permits, and the program works in a certain way, and there can be difficulties. We know that what you say is true, but on the other side, we also know that there are cases of abuse that have been well known, and in fact in Quebec, in certain instances, that the police have had to intervene. So it's a situation where you can't really have a program the way it is now. It's difficult for employers, yes, but you also don't want to be in a situation where there is modern slavery. And we have been told that this is just the tip of the iceberg. There are people who are afraid to go home, and they continue on. Can you speak to us about this type of situation?
I am not aware of any of these situations, but I do fully support that these employers be dealt with in the manner, and not just if it's a foreign worker, if it's a Canadian resident as well. There should be no abuse.
j'ai jamais entendu parler de contrat fermé.
Have you? You've never heard about a closed contract for a Canadian citizen, though, have you? The idea is that the closed contract gives a lot more power to the employer versus a Canadian citizen. I was a freelancer. I worked on contract in my previous life. I was a Canadian citizen, but I know that there were workers that were fearful. And if there is a blacklist that is put in place where certain workers who have an open contract won't be hired by someone, well, it's a problem. I don't like to see it on the news that there are people who say in Quebec there are cases of abuse because of a federal program, which quite clearly is not what it should be.
Please, Mr. Possible.
I am not happy to hear of those instances either. But what you're describing, an open work permit, possible open work permit system, it's a push versus a pull. I think a push would be the Canadian government says, here's 40,000 foreign workers, go find your jobs. Whereas what we have in place right now is a pull. It's an employer that has demonstrated they cannot find a Canadian citizen in our case, for seasonal purposes, to work on their farm. So you have to go through the process, demonstrate that, and get the approvals in place, and then it's a pull. So you're demonstrating you need that. Having an open work permit circumvents that process, and it also doesn't protect Canadian citizens and Canadian jobs.
Thank you, Mr. Posberg, and we'll go to the honourable member, Madam Kwan, for 6 minutes. Madam Kwan, please go ahead for 6 minutes.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I thank the witnesses for their presentations and for being here today. I appreciate Mr. Posberg's comment about the concern of violations of labor codes, whether you're a domestic worker or a temporary foreign workers. I guess the operative difference, though, between those two categories of workers is that temporary foreign workers do not have full status. And people who are here, Canadians or people with permanent resident status, have a status and therefore protection. And so in the case of temporary foreign workers, the biggest problem, of course, that because they don't have full status, they have very little options. So when they are subject to mistreatment or abuse by the employer, what happens to them? They have some dilemmas to make. They have difficult decisions to make. If they report this situation, they stand to lose their job. If they lose their job, they run into a whole host of other problems, and that, of course, includes having the financial resources, not only just to support themselves, but resources to send home to their families as well. We also have situations whereby a lot of the workers may not have access to the information or where to go to make the reports. There's been surveys that's been done. The Migrant Workers Alliance for Change, for example, have done a lot of work in working with migrant workers. And when they survey the migrant workers, how many of them actually received information about their rights, the vast majority of them say that they haven't. And then when you further ask the question about how many of them receive information about their rights in the language in which they speak, that number then reduces even further. And so you can anticipate the difficulties with all of that. So now I want to get into the issue around about status. The Canadian government has put into place to say for temporary foreign workers who are subject to abuse, they call them the vulnerable workers, they can actually report out, and there's a process to which people can go through. If through that investigation is proven that, in fact, there's been abuse, then they would be able to get an open work permit. So I guess what I don't understand is why would we have a system then to say it's only after you've been subject to abuse, you've already experienced terrible working conditions, housing conditions, and what have you, and then you would be able to get an open work permit. It's only after you've been subject to that abuse. So the question then for me is, why not offer the open work permit up front for people? Now, I get it. People will say, but they'll all leave. They won't come, and we will lose the sector. In our last panel, that question was asked of the witnesses, and that was the questions to say, so then is it an issue about working conditions, competitive working environment, so that you can attract and retain workers, both locally and I guess possibly from abroad? I will share this with you. I am an immigrant. My mother, my family, we immigrated here. And when we first arrived, a family of 8, we were low income. My mom went to the workforce and worked in the fields, in a farm. She made $10 a day to support the family. And she was gone from 5 a.m. in the morning and did not get back till 9 p.m. at night. She made $10 a day. Now, I know that was a long time ago. $10 is not very much now. But then back then, it wasn't very much either. Let me just say that. And that is the reality. So people, and she did that for 2 years. She did, to support the family. And she eventually did get a better job, making minimum wages. So the question then is this. For the employer to actually consider better working conditions, competitive wages, so that you can attract and retain domestic workers as well as temporary foreign workers. Wouldn't that be a much better way, instead of subjecting people to abuse and potential abuse? I'm not saying all employers are abusive, but potential abuse. I'm just reading here in this report in the news that has just indicated that the government did a series of assessments, and they found 116 violations, 93 facing monetary penalties totaling $1.5 million. And what were the violations in this regard? They're talking about people around wages, not being compliant with the wages to which they're supposed to pay the worker that they thought they were signed up for, inadequate accommodations. The issue around safe working conditions was amongst these violations. So this is the reality that people are faced with. And I guess what I would urge for you to consider is this. If you were in the place of the worker's perspective, what should be done to ensure that their rights are protected? And that is the big question that, in my mind, that I think is absolutely critical, that I would urge all employers to take into consideration.
You have 30 seconds to respond to this question, and you can always come back in the next round.
So, from a broader context, the foreign worker program, the first and foremost, it needs to protect the Canadian workforce and the Canadian worker. That's at the very top. And this is probably of the same study that you're referring to. In a recent study, 96% of employers were compliant. What I really found interesting was of those 4% that were not compliant, the majority were due to things like not keeping documents for 6 years. Now, I know there's instances where there could be potential abuse, and maybe if it is verified, that's not good. And we do have systems in place already to deal with these situations. But these employers are dealt with. They are blacklisted from the program, and whether it's a foreign worker or whether it's a Canadian citizen, they need to have these protections in place.
Well, absolutely. And for temporary foreign workers, the problem is that they often don't.
We're almost at 7-minute mark, so Mr. Mugoy, we will go to you for 5 minutes, and then
Thank
Madam
you, Mr. Chair.
Kaibaga.
And thanks to both witnesses for your excellent presentations today. I got a couple of quick ones that you can both answer, and I just wanted to know if you're aware of any farmers that have asked the minister to introduce open work permits.
Mr. Bosman, then Madam Blackwell. Mr. Blackwell.
Yeah.
Honourable
Neither
Member.
am I. Are you aware if the Liberal government has asked any farmer their thoughts on introducing open work permits?
Mr. Blackwell.
I'm aware of conversations in the industry about it, but not individual farmers.
Mr. Bosman, do you have anything to say?
No, I didn't get the phone call.
Honourable Member.
So we talked about costs, and I'd just like to ask you, Mr. Posberg, as succinctly as you can, and you got into it a little bit, but can you please explain the costs and the time associated with applying for the LMIA, recruiting a worker, bringing them to Canada, you know, the housing, the flights, and all the rest of it? That's what I think my colleague was asking about, the costs of it, and those are included as well. Can you just give us a rough idea of that?
The substantial amount of time that it takes, and we've been doing this for 15 years, so it gets easier over time. But and we have a process in place. The work permit also costs money and takes time, and recruiting. So we've got a website, and we've got a bit of an international reputation, and that again, I guess, goes back to abuse. You build this reputation up. In today's world with social media, it doesn't take much to lose that reputation. So that's another reason why you try and keep it up. But as far as cost, the opportunity cost of not having a worker at the time that you need them there, if they were to step off that combine or off that air drill, you can't measure that. It's significant, and it's significant enough when in agriculture our margins are as thin as what they are, that's just, there isn't enough margin there, especially to have a potential $500,000 piece of equipment sitting idle without someone to operate it.
Yeah, you mentioned the time frame of getting a crop in, off, and that sort of thing. I'm familiar with it. One of the major concerns being raised about introducing open work permits is the unpredictability and the risk that risk of workers immediately changing jobs once they do arrive in Canada. I think you may have alluded to that. I just wondered if you could share your concern there.
We started the process already in September, early October, in order to get approval for the LMIA. Then we try and sort through the applicants. It takes a lot of time and effort to go through that, depending on where they're from. You may not get the final work permit approval until March or April. Then you pay for their flight, they arrive. You've got the housing in place already because you've had to get the housing inspection. So you've already got a significant amount of money invested in that potential, in that individual. So if you were to lose that individual because they get an open work permit, a farmer could just, any other farmer, or could just go wait at the airport, and as they're pulling their bags off the carousel, just offer them a little bit more, and they could go. And then you don't have to go through the process.
I think, Ms. Breckfeld, do you have any comment on that?
Ms. Blackwell, go ahead, please.
There is significant investment, but it all is intended to be both, again, good for the employer and the employee. For the employee, we want to ensure it's a nice home, a good place to live, and that all of the pieces that are required by legislation are there. And for the employer, we have such a need in this industry, 28,000 shortage, and that's even with the current temporary foreign workers coming in, that there is a desire to invest in our workforce that's coming.
An open work permit, are you concerned that the workers might leave rural communities and try to find a job in a larger center? I think you alluded to that, Mr. Posberg. And
It's kind of interesting. In Saskatchewan, we are growing as a province. Our population's growing, but it's through Saskatoon and Regina. Our rural population continues to decline, and I would expect the same if we had the open work permits. We need foreign workers because we do. It's our population density. We have such a low population density that there's very few.
If the government created these sectoral open work permits, meaning the worker would still have to be employed in the same type of job with a different employer, do you have concerns that other companies would try to poach these workers?
Short answer, Mr. Posberg.
Definitely. We already have a process in place that allows them to switch employers as long as that employer has a valid LMIA, and I don't see the reason to switch to a sectoral work permit.
Just one last one. The Canadian Bar Association has recommended that workers in their own language have access to clear and transparent information about their rights under the Temporary Foreign Worker Program. I believe this is a good idea, but do you support that recommendation?
I do, and I think that's already a requirement under the program, if I'm not
Yeah,
mistaken.
they've made some recommendations in that regard.
You okay? Time is up though. Okay. Ms. Blackwell, quick answer.
I'm aware of it in Ontario, and so I would assume it's available in the language of choice in other provinces.
Thank you, Mr. Maguire, and we will go to Madam Kaibaga for 5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Welcome to it's nice to see you here in person. I just wanted to kind of piggyback on some of the questions. Sorry, if we could just keep quiet for a second. Some of the questions that you were answering on the other side. For the open work permit, if you had the ability to amend or add or suggest some improvements, what would they be? And for the both of you, if I can hear from you.
So I believe that this opportunity to come to Canada is voluntary. And I think that that has to continue to remain that way. They are aware of their what they're going to be paid and what their job responsibilities are. I believe that that is a necessity going forward to continue. I also think that there needs to be a way, and there currently is a way, that if there are problems and it's not working for the employee as far as safety or such concerns, that toll-free number, the opportunity to move to an open permit within the sector, I think that those are things I wouldn't want to lose.
I'm not sure I understood the question. So you were asking what the benefit would be to an open?
No, if you were to suggest any amendments or any improvements on this, what would they be?
Just to the open work permit or the program?
The program.
I would take agriculture out of the program completely. There's so much negative connotation and baggage that surrounds it through other industries' use that I think we need a standalone agriculture and agri-food program, and then you would be able to create a program that's specific for agriculture.
Thank you. This program was created for vulnerable workers, which obviously it's not everyone, but there are some employers that have abused their powers. How else would you suggest that these vulnerable workers are supported? What other program would you suggest?
Madam Blackburn?
No, Mr.
Mr. Rosberg, go ahead, please.
I'm not sure, to be honest. I think that if they are given an open work permit and they do have, there already is systems in place to facilitate them moving to different employers or help if they need, they can reach out and get help. So I'm not exactly sure.
For the migrant worker support program, what are the measures that you would like the federal government to implement for the migrant workers so that they can be aware of the open work permit as well for you, Mrs.
Ms. Blackburn.
Yes.
So CARC's research is continuing on that through the National Workforce Strategic Plan. I believe I'd be better to answer that after those results come out. But I do believe that, once again, it really does have to benefit the employee and the employer, and the opportunity to, continue to grow this sector is going to be reliant on labor force that we don't have enough of right now.
That employer-specific work permits coupled with increased measures to protect foreign workers are necessary in certain circumstances?
Ms. Blackburn.
I apologize. I couldn't hear you because the mic didn't come on fast enough.
Go ahead, Honourable Member.
I apologize. My voice is much lower today. Do you believe that employer-specific work permits, when coupled with increased measures to protect the temporary foreign workers, are necessary in certain circumstances?
Ms. Blackburn.
There are current processes in place that protect the worker and as well help the employer ensure that they have the workforce that they need. If there are problems and the employee is not in a safe situation, is vulnerable is the word, there are processes as well that they can get out of that situation, and that's appropriate.
Do you believe that these were in place before any of the instances where employers were vulnerable to being harmed by the employers happened?
Ms. Blackburn.
I'm not sure what specific situations you're talking about.
The ones that you just mentioned, that there's some other processes that were in place before, but those didn't work. So what else do we need to do to actually make sure that we protect these foreign workers?
Short answer, Ms. Blackburn. Time is up.
I would love to continue this conversation, and CARC is eager to be part of the conversation with government on ways forward and ways to continue to improve the program.
Thank you, Madam Ivanka. We will go to Mr. Bruno Lesapa, 2.5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Chair. Last week, we had the UPA here. They represent agricultural producers in Quebec. They told us that they would be in favor of a sectoral and regional permit for their area, say, of Lac Saint-Jean, where they could move around within that area. Would you think that that would be possible in your situation, in a rural situation, but given the urban situation, would that work?
So I think what you're speaking about the SOP program, and I think for that industry, for the work that they do generally, there's a lot of time required, and then it gets quiet. So having the ability to move around from job site to job site would be of benefit. But that would be specific to that. For us, that would not be beneficial because our seeding time, spraying time, and harvest is the same as everybody else.
OK.
You told us earlier that you never heard anything about stories of abuse in your area. Did I misunderstand, or is that what you actually said?
Not that I'm aware of. I think whether it's a Canadian citizen or a foreign worker, I am not aware of anything in my area.
Vous me semblez
You seem to me to be very well informed. You are someone who I'm sure reads newspapers and is aware of what's going on in the regions, and yet you say that you've heard nothing about abuse of temporary workers with the closed permits?
I didn't say that. I said in my area, and I also let's take a step back here. Sensationalism sells. So you hear it. And there must be instances, otherwise these wouldn't be happening. And as Ms. Kwan has mentioned, there are instances where these have happened. And I hope that those employers are dealt with swiftly.
L'idée, c'est que moi j'aime mieux voir les...
We never hear about success stories where everything goes well. We don't hear about that in the news, where they're placed in good families and so on. But would you not agree that even one case of abuse is one case too many? The situation with closed permits would seem to allow for some abuse, and therefore you have to change the program.
So it's interesting because when you watch the news, the first 28 minutes out of a half-an-hour news program is all negative news, and then they top it off with a happy story. So you can go on your.
I'll go to Madam Kwan for your time, 2.5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. It's interesting, I just pulled up on my computer off of the government's website to look at the list of companies that have violations attached to them for the Temporary Foreign Workers Program. There's 79 pages on that website. I went through the first 10 just in this short period of time, and I counted up the number of violations under number 9 in the code. Number 9 is the pay or working conditions didn't match or were not better than what was listed on the offer of employment, or the job was not the same as what was listed on the offer of employment. So in that first 10 pages, each page has 10 employers on the website. And I counted 45 violations of employers 45 employers that violated code number 9. That is the code that speaks to violating people's working conditions or the pay. And so it may well be that maybe down the road there are other violations that's listed that maybe it's just paperwork, although paperwork is important too because it's documentation of what's going on with respect to the farm. So 45 out of 100 employers in those first 10 pages were violations of pay and working conditions. So, and there's 79 pages in total, to which I have not had time to go through and count them all in this period. I guess the operative word is this, and to Mr. Posberg's point, it doesn't matter that if you're an employee that's working, that's domestic, that has full status, or an employee that's a temporary foreign worker. Any violation is not acceptable. And in the case of temporary foreign workers, the point that is important and why we're having this study is the very notion that when you're temporary foreign workers, you actually don't have the rights protected. I know that in theory, people say you do, but in practice, you actually don't. And during the COVID period, there were people whose violations of their basic working condition was so extensive that people died. People died and went home in a body bag. So I think we just need to remember that and why there needs to be change on the temporary foreign workers and then balance the imbalance of power that exists right now so that workers have some rights and their rights are protected.
Mr. Posberg, time is up, but you can give a short answer.
I cannot and will not try and make excuses for those employers. I've got more to say, but I can say it later.
Thank you, and we'll go to Mr. McGuire and then Mr. Ali, 4 minutes each. Mr. McGuire?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. All of us at this committee want to protect workers, and rather than implementing an open work permit, do you have any recommendations to enhance the current system to better protect workers? You may have some ideas, just quickly.
I think that they've got the protections in place, and I'm speaking more generally for the grains and oilseeds industry. I can't speak to other industries. Maybe Peggy's got other.
There are currently checks and balances established to ensure the safety and the well-being of employees. It doesn't mean that any sector is perfect, but we continue to work towards that. If there needs to be further conversation with either the industry or ways forward, CARC is willing to be part of that conversation.
I guess one quick thing I just thought of. So if an employee, a foreign worker, wants to move from one employer to another employer, maybe having a quicker, more streamlined process in place that it's just a matter of a click on a website, that would be a way that would help facilitate that a lot better.
Right now, it's as long as they have that they can.
Yep.
Ms. Beckfeld, you said in your opening there that the opportunity to come to Canada is, quote, voluntary. I think maybe Mr. Bernal Desep was talking about, it seemed to infer that people were placed with an employer. I think we ought to clear that up a bit. Do people come to Canada voluntarily, or are they forced to come to Canada because they're placed with a firm?
I think that's for Peggy.
Well, I'll ask the question. Yeah. Yeah. I won't put words in Mr. Bernal Decep's mouth. Thanks.
When an employee is considering coming to Canada, they the wages are shared with them. The the job description is described to them and shared with them. No one forces somebody to come to Canada and experience life on a farm here. Instead, they come because that's what they want to do. And we have the need for those employees to come.
Mr. Chair. Mr. Posberg, you alluded to this earlier on in the 21 days it takes to put a crop in the ground. You know, there's spraying, there's hay involved in there for the livestock industry, there's harvest. You know, and we've got, I think, Ms. Breckfeld, you indicated 28,200 vacancies, jobs still there, never mind the 351,000 that are employed. So there's some, you know, we've heard of some bad cases, but it's a handful compared to the 351,000, and we're still 28,000 short. Can you just give me an answer, as you farm, Mr. Posberg, yourself as well, just what happens on that farm if you don't get, what are the ramifications of not getting a crop in, not getting it off, like the losses that can take place? How devastating can this be?
It could be significant. It could be the life and death of your farming operation. What ends up happening if you don't have the workers is you end up working more hours yourself, and then potentially put yourself in a situation that just through fatigue that you're not thinking clearly.
More accidents can happen, that sort of thing. I know what it's all about. And Ms. Breckfeld, can you, through your organization, have you heard of farms that have, you know, just had a disastrous situation? I mean, weather will play into this, wet weather, droughts, all types, and things change sometimes as quickly as they do here in Parliament. So, and sometimes things are pretty slow here, but sometimes, you know, it can change from minute to minute. What can you allude to anything you might know about how disastrous that can be on a farm to not have these people, or to have them and have them leave?
Ms. Blackburn, the time is up, but short answer. Please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
And workers couldn't arrive on time because of logistics. Entire crops weren't picked. In particular, springtime was the asparagus crop, and we saw that a couple of years ago.
Thank you. And now we will end our round with Mr. Ali. Mr. Ali, go ahead for 4 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, I'd like to thank the witnesses for your time and your visit to the committee in this very important issue. My question is to Ms. Brackwell. Given your involvement in the Ontario Federation of Agriculture, could you elaborate on the regional variations and challenges faced by temporary foreign workers in different parts of Canada's agricultural landscape?
The job and what you will be harvesting or planting varies to which area you come from. You have everything from far in southern Ontario, where you are picking and planting and engaged in field crops such as tomatoes, all the way up to jobs in grains and oilseeds, like my colleague here is in. The variety is huge. Again, I will emphasize that these are skilled workers, and they come with a knowledge and an ability to do the work that is necessary to bring a crop that helps feed Canada and the world. And that is part of the answer to food security everywhere we go.
Thank you. My next question is to Mr. Prosper. First of all, thank you on behalf of Canadian to all the farmers and the people who work in agricultural sector for producing wheats and all grains and all the food we put on the table. Thank you so much, through Mr. Chair. Since you have wealth of knowledge dealing with this, what specific recommendation you would give which it does not bound workers to specific employers, but have attractive incentive or measures where you can offer those to workers and you keep them for long term. And every time they come here, they stay with the farmers. So if any specific recommendation, as per your experience, you want to offer to this committee, please.
Mr. Boswell.
I guess in our instance, we treat them with respect, and we try and treat them like family. We treat them like we treat everybody else. We do get quite a few returnees every year, and I think that demonstrates that we do try and go to that extra step. It's just critical that you have people that understand the industry and are passionate about the industry, and that's the key.
Honourable member.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To follow up on this, as we have those foreign workers, temporary worker, come for that specific profession to work in that environment, in that field, we see in a different companies, the workers, they want to stay in with those companies for a longer period of time. What specific things they do? Shouldn't we learn from those companies and have some sort of mechanism in this sector so that those returning workers were able to keep? I think it's, do you want to add something, Ms. Brackwell, on this, please?
The time is up. Short answer, please. That would be great. Thank you.
Rewards for working for a certain employer vary, but I've seen everything from special movie nights to providing transportation to setting up a soccer field and a volleyball court so they could be more happy where they were. And that is what agricultural employers who want to keep their employees do.
Thank you. And Mr. Bosberg, as the statements you made were way shorter than 4 minutes, I'll give you 30 seconds.
Okay, yeah, so our challenge is it's seasonal, and it's always ever going to be seasonal. It's never going to be full-time. So when the person goes home, they've got a life at home, and they can only do that for so often because they need to start a family, or maybe they have a full-time job that they're no longer able to. But it's the same reason why we have trouble having Canadian citizens do these positions, is because everybody wants to drive a tractor or a combine. They drive by and they think, wow, that'd be a great job, but they can't raise a family on a 6-month salary. And
Thank you very
they're
much.
not going to move to rural Saskatchewan.
Sorry, I have to stop you, Mr. Bosberg. If you want to submit the answer to Madam Kwan's or Mr. Ali's, you can submit that in writing. With that, I want to thank both of you on behalf of the committee members for your contribution and for your time. Thank you, Ms. Brackwell and Mr. Bosberg. I call the meeting suspended so we can go in-camera meeting. Appreciate that. Thank you.